So, on today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about a few things. I want to talk about what it means to live an Aquarian lifestyle, especially since we just started this Aquarian Luminosity training, this 10-month program, where there are 10 full weekends that you can take part in. And we've been taking the weekend one to different places. We've done one in Grand Prairie. We've done one in Edmonton. We've got one coming up in Saskatoon. If you live in Saskatoon, we'll be there in March. So those are a really great way to connect to these teachings, especially if you can't do the full 10 weekend course. So it might be kind of an interesting thing to talk about what is Aquarian luminosity and what it means to me. I also really want to talk about recovery, a really important topic, and the whole reason why I practice Kundalini Yoga is because I found total freedom from addiction through that practice. And then I also wanted to talk about this topic of cultural appropriation, which I did cover in one of the classes. So lots of information to cover on this Friday afternoon. And if you're tuning in on Instagram, thank you so much for taking the time to listen in, and you'll be able to get this. We're just about at 10,000 downloads for Revealing the Diamond. So really grateful for everybody who supports us, who listens to these teachings, who shares the podcast with your friends. And those of you who are listening on iTunes, just encourage you to follow me on Instagram at Tiagaprem, Tiagaprem, where I put up a lot of teachings that you can watch the video on the Instagram Live. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me at tiagaprem@thedharmatemple.com. If you have any questions, if you have ideas for podcasts, or if you want to have me out to your city, wherever you are in the world, to teach, I'm more than happy to do that. In fact, in the new year, I'm going to be focusing most of my energy and attention as far as work is concerned with getting these teachings out to different places in the world. So I'd be happy to come wherever you are. Super excited that I'll be in LA at Rama Institute in January. I think that's the 27th, teaching in Los Angeles, representing for the mighty guru Jagat, who we love so dearly. She's incredible. And connecting also with our teacher Guru Singh while we're down there. And of course, shopping for punk rock records, especially at Amoeba, and probably getting tattooed. But hey, what are you going to say? Anywho, that's a long intro. So Aquarian living, for me, what Aquarian living is it is living a spiritual lifestyle where meditation is a big part of your daily practice, because mental clarity is the most important component of a yoga practice. It's not about whether you can do the splits or not. It's about mental clarity. You heard it here, folks. But Aquarian, for me, taking it a little further than that, is living a spiritual lifestyle with creativity as a primary focus. And that doesn't mean you have to be a painter or play a musical instrument. It just means connect to things that inspire you. You know, I really love music. I collect records. I go to shows. These are an important part of my life. When I first started getting interested in yoga and meditation, I kind of felt like, oh, well, I couldn't go to as many shows, and I needed to focus more on living a yogic lifestyle, which at the time meant, oh, don't look at any of your habits with drugs and alcohol. Just try not to go to so many shows, because in order to go to shows, you have to drink. It's a very absurd thing, but that's how my brain operated, and that's how a lot of brains operate around music culture. And instead of looking at that, I would just flip-flop between the two. I'd go out, I'd see the show, I'd get trashed, I'd feel terrible about myself the next day, and then I would say I'm not going to a show for a long time. Maybe I would even change the music that I was listening to, because I'm very sensitive, and we all are. We may not know it, but we're all very sensitive to sound, because we are made of sound. We're influenced by sound. And so I would sort of turn my back to that part of my life, and I would spend a lot more time focusing on my yoga practice that didn't deal with my neuroses. It was about stretching. And this went on and on and on. And eventually I was able to take a look at some of my patterns and habits and realize that I love music. I love going to the shows. I love my record collection. I'm inspired by that. part of my life. And the thing that was causing all of the pain in my life was not music. It was my addiction, and also me not looking at my mental patterning that had been going on for 20 years that learning to do the splits wasn't going to fix. And so Aquarian living is a commitment to living that creative lifestyle with some technologies to support you to live that creative lifestyle with a healthy relationship with your neuroses, with a healthy relationship with your addictions, with a more mental clarity, so that you can show up and be the best version of yourself in all the different areas of your life without compromising who you are, thinking that you're supposed to be something. Because really, a yoga practice and a meditation practice is not about becoming something. It's not about becoming more spiritual. It's not about becoming more flexible. It's about clearing away some of the things that stand in your way from you being the best version of yourself. That's really what Aquarian living is all about. That's really what a meditation and yoga practice is all about. And it took me a long time to figure that out. I think I started this spiritual journey 20 years ago. And I remember even looking at some of the punk rock kids in the scene who were straight edge and vegan and thinking to myself, I wish I could do that, but I never had the guts at the time. In the inside, I was saying I would like to try that. On the outside, I was saying, F that. I just want to do my own thing. Nobody tells me what to do. And that's a healthy attitude, but as we've learned, if you've listened to these Revealing the Diamond podcasts, discussions, and tune-ins, we need both freedom and discipline, and it takes a lot of honesty to show up and make decisions that are for the best version of you. And I think it's healthy to say, nobody tells me what to do to a certain extent, but also recognize that every decision you make has an impact on the world around you. So I try and make decisions that are going to be of the best service for the animals, eat a plant-based diet, try to live compassionately, and I try to listen to music that supports those ideals. It's not like I only listen to vegan bands or anything like that, but, take a band like Good Riddance, who's got great messages about taking care of the animals. I listen to that, and it inspires me to keep up with my meditation and be compassionate. And it's really loud and may sound aggressive to some people, but for me, that works. And I think that's maybe where the crossover here is for when I'm talking about punk rock and Aquarian living. There are a lot of parallels between the two. There is this idea of do it yourself, make your own, kind of go against the capitalist way of looking at it. Like, I deserve to have all of the great benefits, and as long as the pain and suffering of others doesn't affect me, then I don't mind, which is called privilege, and we've got a lot of issues with that in our society. And so it's a movement that says, hey, wait a second, there's a problem. The workers slaving at the bottom of the tower and the rich and powerful at the top of the tower, it shouldn't work like that. We are all born with infinite value. We all have infinite worth from birth, and we all have something to share. And for us to think that some people deserve some rights and privileges and other people don't, based on their beliefs, based on their sexuality, based on their gender, based on their whatever we use to separate each other, I'm not into that. And so those are parallel lines between Aquarian living and punk rock for me. And so that's sort of how they fit together. Now, I'm not playing punk rock during my sadhana at 5 a.m. while I'm doing my meditation, but the essence of it is the same. And I think that's what a yogi does too. They look for the through line and everything. And a yogi, you're sort of like an alchemist, like you're paying attention to all of these practices in your life, be they relationships, be they music, be they the food that you eat, be whatever it is that you're doing as a practice in your life on a daily basis. Does it support the best version of you to shine through? And if you're really honest with yourself, you'll see the things that do. There's no doubt about it. I take as much influence from Ian MacKaye and Minor Threat as I do from my teacher Guru Singh and Kundalini Yoga. And I've had the gateway to this, all of this for me, a big part of that was Noah Levine, who wrote the book Dharma Punks, who, he talked about going to his first meditation retreat after being in prison and growing up around punk rock and being really rough around the edges, blasting NWA as he pulled up there and thinking, these people aren't going to have anything to teach me. And now here he is sharing these teachings about recovery, but not compromising himself. Now, I bring all of that up to say, let's talk about this idea of cultural appropriation, especially because we live in a society that really worships and bows at the throne of the intellect. And so we get into some problems here, especially with the Turbans. And I thought, what a great opportunity to talk about this as I sort of draw the comparisons of my own spiritual practice. And so here's the issue. I'll sort of paint it like this in my experience, and then I'll let you guys, because you are the masters, you are the teachers, you are the ones who get to think for yourselves, decide what that looks like. But let's say that there is a person who is struggling with addiction and is struggling to find a way to break free from their neuroses, from the patterns that are keeping them from the best version of themselves. And they discover a practice that requires them to do some things that a religious group also does, and they're closely tied together. So I bring all of that up saying that when I began this practice, I was getting up early for sadhana, as my teacher had said that's what I should do. And I was wrapping my hair, growing my hair, and I was doing a traditional prayer, which I still do every morning, by the way, called Japji, which is the traditional prayer of the Sikhs, and doing some practices that would be considered Sikh practices. And so you wear your turban and you do your Japji, and you're also living your life and being in the world and all of that. And as time goes by, you notice, wow, this is really working for me. I'm finding freedom from my addiction by doing these practices, right? And then as you're doing this, you think, maybe I'll experiment a little bit more with doing these practices. And so you start to grow the hair on your face and not trimming it, because that's, some of the practices that the Sikh people do. And you continue with the practices that you're doing, and you're also drawing inspiration from other sources, from Buddhist teachers, from punk rock music, from all of these different things. And you realize, I find that it's a lot easier for me to connect with people if I sort of navigate this from a place where I'm in the world, I'm doing the practices that work for me, I'm being really honest with myself. Some of them work and some of them don't. So isn't that what a yogi does? I mean, isn't that a complete spiritual practice? Now, the issue that comes up along with that is there are people who are practicing these religions who or are from these cultures who say, well, if you don't have your turban on 24 hours a day, then you shouldn't be wearing a turban, because Sikh people were persecuted for wearing the turban. And when somebody takes the vows to live as a Amritdhari Sikh, meaning you take a baptism to be a Sikh who has taken the vows, and you wear the sword, you don't cut the hair, you do all of these things. Am I supposed to say, okay, well, I won't do those things, I don't want to offend you, even though I've done these practices that are what brought me freedom in my sobriety and in my spiritual practice and are very meaningful to me, but I don't practice them the way that you say? It's an interesting thing, because then people say in reference to that, or in response to that, they say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. A turban is not a hat, and these are our rules. That doesn't work for me. And you can call it cultural appropriation, you can call it what it is, but if somebody comes to me and they say, I'm really struggling with an addiction to drugs and alcohol, and they want to know what I did to get clean and sober, what I do as a daily practice to support my sobriety, I'm not going to say, oh, and by the way, don't do this because you might offend somebody. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And I know it's a tough thing. It's a difficult thing to explain to somebody. It's the same as, I'm not only a Buddhist. I'm not only a Sikh. And I think the interesting thing is when you look at the Sikhs and when you study the history of Sikhi, which is sort of deeply connected to the practice of Kundalini Yoga, there's this story of Guru Nanak when he decides that he's going to go on this pilgrimage to Mecca where all the Muslims are going, and he sits to rest because he's tired, and he puts his feet facing Mecca. And somebody says to him, sir, can you not put your feet that way? That's where God is. And he says, in response to that, tell me where God isn't and I'll put my feet there. To me, that is a very punk rock response. It's like Yogi Bhajan gave us this incredible teaching that said if you can't see God at all, then you can't see God at all. And that means that you're going to have to challenge some things. And so it's always an interesting conversation when somebody says, are you a Sikh? And it's like, well, by the original context, yes, I am. But by the modern religious context, I'm not. I'm all of these things. I am a student of Jesus. I am a student of the Buddha. I am a student of Ian MacKaye and Minor Threat. I'm learning from everything. I see the teachings in everything. And for somebody to think, well, that's not the way, you have to only do it this one way, I got to challenge that. And I'm an atheist, and I believe in God. I'm all of these things, and I'm looking for the through line of truth in all of it. And that's what it's about. And that's a challenging thing. And it's a challenging thing to explain. It's a challenging thing even for me, because from time to time I hear these things and I question myself. Maybe I am not supposed to do it this way. Maybe I would be more free if I did what the Sikh religion is telling me, and I have to not cut my hair and I have to wear a turban. And then the flip side of it is I want to reach as many people as I can, especially people who are struggling with addiction to drugs and alcohol. That's really, really important to me. It's more important to me that I'm bringing these teachings from Yogi Bhajan, from the Buddha, from my experiences with music that I think is really about social change, that is really about eating a compassionate diet. There's music that inspires me to do that. And so I'm going to do those things. But I do question it from time to time. Well, what if I, kept my turban and kept my hair and didn't take, trim or whatever it is, and I do all of the prayers in the morning, and if I did those things, would I be happier? And the thing is, I don't think I would. I think I'm paying attention. I'm a sovereign human. I'm paying attention to what it is that I'm supposed to do. And I think the Guru is guiding me to do that. And I feel it from a place of experiential, empirical wisdom more than I do from these are the rules. And the rules apply more to the intellect. And I do these practices less about intellectualism, less about spirituality, less about physical practice. I do them for mental clarity because life is hard enough as it is. It's difficult to show up as the best version of yourself. I was just listening to the radio today that they're doing some pardons in Canada for people who were criminally charged for being homosexual. This isn't that long ago. In 1967, that's not that long ago. It's insane. And I think my duty as a teacher is to show up and serve and love people to the best of my ability to bring social change. That's how I want to raise my daughter. I don't want to say, these are the rules, this is what we believe, and this is the only way to do it. I want to say, here are the practices that I do. This is the music that I listen to that inspires me to be a better person. I don't take drugs and alcohol because it nearly took my life. I've seen it take so many people's lives. It turned me into a complete asshole for years. And the only thing that really worked to get me out of it was the practice of Kundalini Yoga. That's why it's so meaningful to me. I want to talk about Buddhism. I want to talk about the Christianity, not the rules and regulations, but the way that I saw Jesus as a child. That's where the inspiration for me comes, to be a rebellious, heartfelt, compassionate human being comes from. And then the intellect gets thrown in there. Well, these are the rules. In order to do that, you have to be a this and you have to do that. And it just so isn't true. And it happens in yoga even. It's like, oh, you want to be a yoga teacher, you have to do this 200-hour training, and then you have to do this 500-hour training, and then you have to do this, and you have to teach this sequence. And that isn't how it works. Yoga means oneness with the best version of yourself. And a yoga teacher is somebody who is able to share multiple techniques that somebody may be able to connect to so that they can be free. So that they can be free from their addiction, so that they can be free from their neuroses, so that they can be free from the bondage and the chains of being abused as a child, so that they can be free from the bondage and the chains of feeling like if I was skinnier, then I'd be happier. People are in pain. That's the big thing. People are in pain, and we, as teachers, as leaders in this society, we want to show up and say, hey, guess what? I was in a lot of pain too. I was addicted to drugs. I was addicted to alcohol. I fell into the misogyny of living in a patriarchal society. I've been a racist. I've been an asshole. I've been all of those things. And now is the time for us to look at all of those things and see the divisive lines and see through the divisive lines and see the oneness within it. And it doesn't mean that you're not unique, and that doesn't mean that your struggle's not real. Like I said about homosexuality in Canada, that is a real struggle. When I say that we're one, it doesn't mean forget about it. It means acknowledge it. Everybody. What a person's sexuality is doesn't affect you. Unless you're not consenting to having sexual relationship with the person, then it does. Then you're being assaulted. But other than that, love everyone. And don't cram your rules down everybody's throats, whether you're religious or not religious. And that's the big challenge. And to me, that's very punk rock, and to me, that's very Aquarian. And to me, that's how a Sikh is, and to me, that's how a yogi is. I am all of those things. And if you tell me that God won't accept me for that, then I'm an atheist too. I'm so glad that we got to just sit down and have this opportunity to scream and shout about being punk and Aquarian and Sikh. I'm sitting in my couch, on my couch in my living room, all by myself, having this conversation. I mean, obviously, some of you on Instagram are tuned into this, and I'm so grateful that you guys take the time to listen to me go on about this. And you know what? When people become very intellectual about these things, and they say, oh, you shouldn't be able to do this, and this is cultural appropriation, and these are the rules of the tradition, and I mean, the role of the teacher is to challenge those things. And all of the teachers who've inspired me before, that is not an easy road to walk. And for me to think that, oh, well, it should be easy, that would be absurd. It isn't easy. It isn't easy being a person during these times saying that yoga is not stretching. It isn't easy being a person saying that just because you have a turban and a beard doesn't make you a Sikh. It isn't easy being a person who's saying, hey guys, we need to change the way we eat. You need to go vegan and stop consuming animals. It isn't easy in a time when people are super stressed out and their nervous systems are fried, and saying, a great thing to do would be to get off the drugs and alcohol. These are not necessarily easy things. And I'm thankful for that. Because every day when I show up and I say, I'm going to deal with my stuff, I'm just as, I cause just as much pain and suffering as anybody else, but I am committed to walking on this planet and doing everything I can to lessen that load in my life, in the life of my family, in the life of my students, in the life of everyone I meet. And to be honest, my meditation, my time spent early in the morning doing my prayers, meeting one-on-one with students who are struggling with their addiction, chanting the sacred mantras in Gurmukhi and Sanskrit and English, those things bring me mental clarity. Going to my turntables and putting on a Good Riddance record or a Minor Threat record, those things are all spiritual practice for me, and it might not make sense to everybody, but you got to be you. That's really what this is about. So before we close, I just want to give a shout out to Ginger Giraffe here. Thank you so much for all of your comments on the Instagram Live. Yoga Mom 81, yes, you know it. You're always sharing these great teachings, sister. We love you, and we're glad that you're part of this community. It's not about what we wear, but how aware we are. I love it. I couldn't agree more. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and sharing your thoughts. Anyhow, I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Revealing the Diamond. Lots more to come. You can hear this talk on... what am I trying to say here? You can hear this talk on iTunes. You can get it on iTunes for sure. You can download any of the previous episodes on there. And again, if you want to get in touch with me, hit me up, teagaprem@thedharmatemple.com. Or you can also send me a direct message on Instagram @teagaprem. And we will see you soon. Lots of love. Satnam.